Everyone, welcome into the show. Thank you for being here. We have a very special guest, Dave Jackson. This is one of, I consider him a mentor. I know he doesn't consider himself a mentor, but somebody I've looked up to in the podcast industry for years now. Dave, welcome to the show.
Oh, glad to be here. Ready to talk some podcasting.
All right, so I see you got the Sweetwater t-shirt on. What's going on with Sweetwater?
Sweetwater is a company that approached me. I'm actually an affiliate for them, and the thing I like about them is their prices are typically the same, if not better, than Amazon. They add a year to the built-in warranty of the company, and they have free shipping. And where they really outshine some of these other companies is their customer support. I get a call from them probably, I don't know, once a quarter, just saying, hey, what's up? And there's a guy I work with, and if I ever have any questions on anything, that's the nice thing about it. Say I buy a Zoom PodTrack P4, and I can't figure out how to get to connect a phone to it or whatever I'm doing, I can actually call Sweetwater for tech support because I bought it from them. You're not going to get that from Amazon. So it's just something that when they approached me, I went out, bought some stuff through them, and that's where I was like, wow, you guys are nuts with your customer service. And then I approached them and had to kind of knock on a few doors. I'm like, you guys have an affiliate program? They kind of do and kind of don't. It's kind of weird. But yeah, so and when I bought my first thing from them, you get a free t-shirt. So, and I'm just happen to be wearing it today.
I love it, man. Yeah. I know one thing about you is you work with a lot of people. Before we started recording, you said you're Switzerland. I really think that you are, because you're really good at kind of being in the middle and just helping everybody. Do you feel like that has helped you on your podcasting journey?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. When because right now I work for Libsyn, but before I worked for Libsyn, I was just Dave from the School of Podcasting. So I knew the Libsyn team, I knew the Blueberry team and Spreaker and Mark over at Captivate and the guys from Buzzsprout. So I know all those guys. And then when I joined Libsyn as an employee, well, I still have those relationships. And so I always tell people, like, well, right now you're talking to Dave from the School of Podcasting. You're not talking, I can never speak for Libsyn. That's Rob's job. But I can be Dave from the School of Podcasting. And I always just let people know, it's like, hey, don't reveal your big secrets because, I got to play for the home team. But there are times when, different scenarios will come up and I'm like, okay, this works and that works. But it's the relationships that really I think are, we love to make money with podcasting. That's great. But in the end, it's the relationships that often lead to that. So this always sounds like a weird humble brag, and I don't mean it to, but it's a true story. There was an event called the New Media Show or New Media Expo, and they were looking for a new guy to run their podcast track. And the guy called Todd over at Blueberry, and Todd said, I don't know, what about Dave Jackson? And then they called a guy over at Spreaker, and he said, well, what about Dave Jackson? And then they called Rob from Libsyn, and he said, I don't know, what about Dave Jackson? And that's because I just knew all those people, and he finally called me and said, okay, well, you got 3 people saying I should call you. So, so it's really helpful. It's because sometimes you wouldn't have a relationship with people, but because you have a podcast, if I went to somebody and said, hey, can I spend like 20 minutes with you picking their brain? They'd be like, get out of here, kid. You bug me. But if I say, will you come on my podcast? Now we got time to talk. So.
And that, I think for me, that's my favorite thing about podcasting is I've been able to learn so much simply from talking to people that are smarter than me. That's what I look at podcasting as, is I'm always talking to people that know more than I do about specific things. And it really helps me evolve as a podcaster, sometimes as a parent, it just makes me better because I'm always talking to people that are steps above me. And I do agree that that comes before the money. So do you have any particular situations where, you've had somebody that, has come to you and they've really referred you to a particular situation where money came from it, other than the one you just explained? But has it been some type of thing where they're like, hey, this is a person you should work with, this is a show you should sponsor?
It's usually, it's like a situation. I'll give you an example. Because I know these people, I was at, I think, PodFest, and I was talking to Pat Flynn. Well, I hired Pat Flynn when I worked for the New Media Expo. And so I was talking to Pat, and then Mike from the membership guys showed up. Well, I know Mike, so I'm talking to that. So Michael Stelzner walks up, and Michael Stelzner from Social Media Marketing World walks up, and he knows Pat, and I know Michael a little bit, but I've never really gotten to flex my podcasting muscles in front of Mike. And so I was talking with Mike, and he's talking to Pat. We're all talking to Mike and this and that. I get home, Michael Stelzner emails me and said, hey, how would you feel about speaking at Social Media Marketing World? So it got me in the right place at the right time. And by speaking at Social Media Marketing World, I then got clients. So it's one of those, a lot of it's like not directly to that. I mean, I am getting paid. Next year, I'm speaking at an event in Dayton, Ohio, and they're paying for my hotel. They're paying me to speak. So that's kind of cool. But that's usually most of my speaking gigs are just the opportunity. It's like in some cases, they'll pick up the hotel or things like that. So usually, and then it's up to me to take advantage of that opportunity, which will then lead to things that make money. And I didn't think it made that much of a difference until COVID. And now I wasn't flying all over the place speaking. And all of a sudden I was like, the old my consulting went down and I was like, oh, I'm not in front of, a couple hundred people a month. And I was like, that would explain, how effective that was. So,
yeah. And I agree with you on that. I think when people ask me about speaking, I always tell them, in the podcasting world, it's not the norm to get paid a bunch of money to speak. Right. It's not like corporate where you're getting $5,000, $10,000 for 2 or 3 hours or a weekend of training or something. Right. That's not what the podcast world is. It's more of relationships, and you have to be ready, to talk to people in the hallways after you get off stage and take advantage of those moments. So let me ask you this. How many people have come to you and asked you, hey, can you help me be a podcast speaker? Because that's something I've been asked a lot.
To just be, I don't know if podcast speaker is any different than any kind of speaker. It's a matter of, there are a couple different websites that you can go to and they'll list here these events and then you have to submit. It's what I do. And to me, this just seems the same way you get a job. If right now, if you are looking for a job, you look at the job listing and you tailor your resume to have the keywords and such that they're looking for. So you can't have just one resume and use it for everybody. It just doesn't work that way because most of the time, the first person that sees your resume is not a person. It's a robot that's looking for keywords. So I do the same thing. I will go to the event, and if they have like some sort of slogan or something about this is where we do yada, yada, I'm kind of get a vibe of what the show is about. And then I try to come up with a kick butt title to really grab people, probably right on the borderline of clickbaity, but for some reason that will, again, grab their attention. And then it's just and then at the end of the session, the attendees will be able to blank. And then it's a matter of just, because that's usually what people want. They don't want a bunch of theory. They want, when I walk out of here, because what happens then is when that person leaves the event, and they go home and put into action some of the things that you recommended, they'll say, yeah, that guy was really good, but they also will give part of that credit to the actual event. Yeah,
I 100% agree. And that's why I never sell from stage. I just don't believe in it. It's never comfortable, especially in a podcast where I feel like it's better to just, like you said, focus on the solutions. And then for me, I do Q&A a lot. I love answering questions and helping people with strategy and all that stuff. But I never stand up there like, hey, you can go to this website and buy this. It's like, no, you can go here and get a free thing. But I never do that.
Well, I've done that on stage. First I always ask, I'm like, hey, am I allowed to have like a giveaway? Like, hey, if you go to this website.com/whatever, you can get my free thing, basically trying to build my email list. And I will ask if that's available. And if they say no, that's fine. And even in some cases, I remember I was at one event and I found out later that I was allowed to sell from the stage. And I didn't really want to do that. So I said, well, hey, I help people. I said, my background's in teaching, not marketing. And I said, so that's probably why I'm not making millions right now. I said, but I'm here to help you learn how to podcast. And I said, I'm not here to pitch you a bunch of things. And I had people come up to me and say, thank you, because it was okay to pitch. Everybody was pitching like, it was the World Series. It was nuts. And so the fact that I got up there and said, hey, I'm not going to pitch. And at the end, it was like, that's my website. If you want to contact me, that's where you find me. And that was something that It was just at the time I was like, oh, I didn't really plan anything. And because I'm used to no pitch. Usually it's no pitch.
Yeah. That's
because who wants to sit through a pitch,
I think they have to say that because I've been to events where they do allow pitches, and it turns into it turns into like a day of webinars. Like everybody's up there talking about themselves the entire time. No actual useful, helpful strategies or methods or systems. It's just we're going to talk about ourselves for an hour, and at the end, we're going to sell you something. And that's just exhausting to hear. Did you know that 99% of podcasters struggle to ever make any money from their show? I'm not kidding you. 99%. Most shows never make a dime from their podcast. That's a problem, obviously. I know you see other shows out there that are getting sponsored. Some shows are getting bought by bigger companies, and you want some of that revenue too. I totally understand. I get it. The problem is most podcasters are not prepared to make that kind of money from their show. They just aren't ready for it because of two reasons. Number one, the lack of a marketing plan. You don't have a strategy to market your show. How are you going to get listeners? How do you get attention? How do you build an audience high enough to where you actually can make money from it? That's a struggle. Now, number two is actually knowing how to monetize, right? Knowing how to negotiate with a sponsor, knowing how to sell your own products. All of this stuff needs to be learned over time. That's why we created Castocity. This is a tool that helps you automate your entire marketing process when it comes to marketing your show, whether it's you on a solo episode by yourself or if you have special guests. We help you automate that entire process. It saves you a ton of time and make everything super, super easy. Now, we also help you with monetizing. Whether you want to set up deals with sponsors and sell your assets like a massive Instagram account or email blast, we help you with that. We even give you scripts so you can negotiate with sponsors and get paid what you are worth. So Castocity is a no-brainer. We're running a special deal right now. I want you to check it out. It's linked in the description below. Here, another thing I wanted to ask you about, which kind of fits in this realm, are the new abundance of podcast coaches. Since COVID, I feel like now most of the people I know that were thinking about starting a podcast in the beginning of 2020 are now podcast coaches. And I don't even consider myself a podcast coach. I don't even do as much consulting as I used to, partially because of this reason. It's kind of like, not that even that it's oversaturated. It's just, I think we've reached a point where it's just so many, and it's so many that aren't really credible. It doesn't fit for me. So do you have an opinion on the new abundance of podcast coaches in the industry?
Yeah, it's, boy, how do I say this without sounding high and mighty? It's like saying, I'm going to take horse riding lessons from somebody who doesn't have a horse. You're kind of like, wait, what? Because what happens working in tech support is I get questions that say things like, I'm working on this for a client. And then the question underneath of it, like with blinking lights, blaringly shows, I don't have the basics of how a podcast works in general. And not that you have to understand the technology, but you kind of do.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to understand what an RSS feed is. You don't have to write code, but you have to understand how things flow.
The basics, at least. The basics.
Yeah. And then I just see so many people with the, I will get you ratings and reviews, which kind of social proof, but there are still people saying that will get you up the charts. And we've kind of proven that's not true. People will say, I will get you money from day one. And there are companies that will do that, but they don't tell you it's 0.0017 cents per download. So when you get your 28 downloads, enjoy your, 7 cents and that whole 9 yards. So it's one of those things. It is what it is. And with anytime anything is hot, I'm sure there's some TikTok consultant out there that will tell you how to game this or that. There's always that, but it is one of those things. And part of it is fueled by when you start a podcast, somebody that knows, likes, and trusts you. If you're putting out a good podcast, they're like, well, that's really good stuff. They know, like, and trust you. They might want to learn podcasting from you.
Yeah.
So that's where I think some people go, oh, I didn't even know I was a podcast consultant, but this guy wants me to teach me, and she wants to learn this or that. And so they go, well, I'm going to go throw out my shingle because this person just validated that I know enough to start one. And so, it's one of those gray areas that I kind of go, well, on one hand, But it's also the thing that I see is it's one thing to launch a podcast. And that's kind of what you're all about. It's another one to grow it. I always tell people, I kind of joke and say, look, I can fart in my phone and have it in Apple by next week. So there you go. I've launched a podcast. But when you write a book, it's not, you think writing the book is the hard part. Writing the book is the easy part. Getting people to read it is the part that's tough. So, and I had a guy this week that approached me, and I'll keep it anonymous, but he has a sport. So let's say it was, I don't know, baseball or football or whatever. And he had gone to Apple Podcasts and typed in baseball and wanted to know why it didn't come up at the top. And I was like, well, there are people that have been doing podcasts about your sport for a decade already, and they've got some juice in Apple Podcasts. And, they're just, and they weren't writing any show notes. And I was like, well, you've got, and he actually had kind of a person that was somewhat famous in his particular sport. And I go, having a celebrity doesn't ensure success, because there've been plenty, I remember, Kathy Lee Gifford had a podcast for a while that just tanked. Andrew Dice Clay had a podcast that didn't do very well because he thought it was radio. And I love the Dice man. I think he's hilarious. But in the middle of the podcast, he'd do a radio reset. You'd be like, you're listening to the Dice Man. And I'm like, did you think I tuned into the middle? Like, what's going on? So having a celebrity doesn't ensure that you're going to be famous. I mean, Amy Schumer got paid a lot of money to do a podcast on Spotify. And she just thought, well, I'll just sit around and talk with my friends and it'll be entertaining. And I was like, I could make it through. I listened to 2 episodes and I went, wow, she did zero prep for this. So it's one thing to start a podcast. It takes a little more work and a little dedication, a little research maybe to create a good podcast.
Yeah, I agree. I think it takes time to really build a podcast that's a platform. One thing I tell people is, hey, if you really want to make money from this, focus on building a business around it. Like, have the podcast be a pillar of your business, and that's going to be more profitable for you long term. Because if you try to approach this like you're a celebrity with 1 million followers that's going to make a ton of money from sponsorships, it's going to take you some time to get there. You're better off creating products, building a brand. That's just a better plan to be successful as a host. Again, if your goal is to make money, that's how you should approach it.
Absolutely. I've had that email exchange as well. Kind of no, you don't understand who I am. Like, I'm the king of Instagram or whatever. And you're like, you know what? That's a different platform, and that whole 9 yards. And you're right. One of the questions I always ask people is, why are you starting a podcast? And I used to say, how would you know it was successful? Because what I'm basically trying to get at is this a business or not? And so I finally just put it out on the table. I'm like, is this a hobby or a business? Because I'm asking, like, do you want to make money? Because if you do, that's great. How are you going to make money? Are you going to sell your own stuff? Are you going to do affiliate marketing, whatever? And let's position the content to drive people to whatever it is you're selling, whatever it is. And because I've had so many people that start a podcast and they're like, well, I just want to get the word out there and I want to have fun with my friends and this and that. Great. Well, we can do that. Sounds like a hobby podcast to me. And then 2 months later, they're like, we're not making any money at this. And I'm like, you didn't say you wanted to make money. You said you want to have fun with your, talk Batman in the basement. I'm like, well, you're doing that. Congratulations. You're successful. Well, yeah, but I'm not making any money. And I'm like, when I asked you, you said it was a hobby. You said you just wanted to have fun. I'm like, so we need to know that so you can structure the information. Yeah, because
when you structure it, I think in the beginning you have to structure the show correctly so you can be successful in that. I separate it kind of how you do it, but I call it either a business or entertainment podcast. Business is you either sell products, you provide a service. It could be digital. You could be doing coaching, consulting, whatever it is. And even, physical brands could have, if you have an apparel company, you could have a podcast. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, entertainment shows are music, movies, pop culture, stuff like that. That's more of I'm going to make money from sponsorships or affiliates or maybe merchandise one day. You can't be on both. It's really hard to be on both sides of that. It's really, really difficult. And the people that can't figure out which side they're on, especially in the beginning, are the ones I see struggling the most, man. And then they end up giving up, and I see them in 4 months and they're like, yeah, that podcasting thing was a waste of time. And it's like, you didn't really have a plan when you launched it. So.
Yeah. Well, you just made a great point. And I just got off doing a live show and somebody made a good line and I was like, ooh, I'm going to write that one down. Movies sell popcorn. And I was like, because we talk about box office of the movie, we think about the ticket sales. Where the real money comes in, if you look at like what it costs to make popcorn, it's nothing. I mean, popcorn is dirt cheap, and yet you're paying, $12 for something that cost 47 cents to make. Right. So the profit on the popcorn, same thing. I worked in a restaurant when I was going to college. Fountain drinks are ridiculously cheap. And yet you turn around and you sell, here's a 12-ounce thing for $1.50 that cost you, 9 cents to make. It's like there's a ton of profit in that. So when we think about movies and entertainment, we think they're making money from the tickets, and they are, but the real money in the movie business is the popcorn.
Yeah, that's a good point, man. And I just think we're moving in a different direction with podcasting overall. I love where the industry is going and how it's evolving, and I think now we're getting more of our energy focused on what's really important when it comes to having a show. Now we've done it long enough. It's been around long enough. Now it's more mainstream. Everybody knows what it is. Now we're getting to the point where I have more people asking me, how do I market my show and how do I get listeners? Before they ask me about how they can make money. That gives me hope, because when people ask me about the making money part too early, I immediately know they're probably not going to be successful. And not to say that, you can't want to make money. Everybody wants to. I'm not mad at that. It's just that if that's your main focus early on, it's really difficult to actually get to it, because there's so many other steps that come before the monetizing. If your mind immediately goes to the check, we aren't going to be here long, just to be honest.
Exactly. Step one, grow your audience. And they go, wait, but I want to make money. I'm like, yeah, step one is grow your audience. And they don't get that. And I wish I could say I was making this up, but I see it probably a couple times a year. And that is, what can I talk about that will bring in the most money, the quickest, doing the little bit, as little as I can. It's like the most laziest. I was like, so you want to do nothing and make money quickly? And I was like, yeah, you're not going to make it. It's just not like nothing. You go do you. That's fine. I'm just here to tell you that's not the attitude I recommend to have when you're starting to.
Man, I totally agree. So I know you've heard a little bit about what's going on with Facebook and podcasting. I'm excited for it, but I'm not looking forward to the time when they put that boost your episode button right there, asking for $2 or $3. I can see that coming. What's your opinion on what Facebook is doing with podcasting?
Yeah, it's on one hand, I like the fact that people are talking about it. And if you're trying to reach teenagers, you probably could care less, because they're over on TikTok, they're on Instagram. But if you have a bunch of boomers that are like hanging out on Facebook, it might be a cool thing. So I'm a big fan of be everywhere. If it doesn't take too much out of the time, and you can also test, there are ways you can track and see. The thing I used to love is I would put a video on Facebook of my episode, and you could see how far people watched. And on Facebook, now this is before they had the deal where when you start to scroll, the video would go to the bottom right-hand corner. They had it, well, when you scrolled, it would stop. And if you got to a minute, you were a king. So this will be interesting. I'm interested to see, because now from what I understand, if you scroll, the player's going to go to the bottom right-hand corner and keep playing in the background. I was like, all right, well, we'll see how this goes. So, but I'm with you. Facebook is a necessary evil. It's if you've watched the thing on Netflix, The Social, whatever it was, I see what they're doing, and they're kind of creepy. So, I'll definitely throw my stuff out there and see what happens, but I don't see this being, another hockey stick growth of downloads. I could be wrong. I hope they prove me wrong. It's nice to have, a company as big as Facebook trying something, so anything that brings more visibility to podcast, I'm for.
I've seen some people say it'll be like a podcast killer. I'm like, you understand that you have to put your RSS feed into Facebook. Like you're literally taking your podcast, putting it on here. They're not launching their own hosting platform. That's not. I heard the same thing when it comes to Clubhouse. When that first came out, everybody said it was a podcast killer. Now we're not even halfway through the same year, and Clubhouse is dying. It went from millions of downloads a month to now they can't get past 100,000. The past 2 months they've been under 100,000 downloads. So it's like all these things people have proclaimed to be podcast killers, it hasn't lived up to the hype.
Oh, and Rob Walsh from Libsyn has a great presentation, and he has clips going back to like 2006 that podcasting is dead, and podcasting is dead in 2010, and then podcasting is dead in 2012. And what it is, it's not that podcasting dies. If you look at Edison research, it's grown every single year. It's that the hype of podcasting comes in waves. So they quit writing about it and things of that nature. But yeah, if the death of podcasting, it's been, called dead so many times. And so when I heard Clubhouse and they're like, oh, this is, and I said the power of podcasting is the time shiftedness. That's one of the key things. I can record something today and you can listen to it 3 months from now. It doesn't matter. And it's there and you can listen to it or not. You can fast forward. Where Clubhouse was like, oh, nobody's recording this. You can say whatever you want. And I'm like, I don't know if you've been on the internet, but if I can hear it, I can record it. If I can see it, I can steal it. It's like, that's just the way the internet works. So I knew that wasn't going to last. And I will give them credit. The whole fear of missing out campaign, you have to be invited and all this other stuff. From a marketing standpoint, there was a lot to learn from Clubhouse, but I knew the minute I jumped in that I was like, well, and I've had some really good conversations, and I've had a lot of like, well, that was 45 minutes of my life I can't get back. And for me, when I go in now and I look at the different things that are going on, I feel like I'm looking at cable television. It's like, yep, not interested, not interested, not interested, and I'm not. It's just, so we'll see what happens. But I know Spotify just launched their version of Clubhouse, and Mark Cuban has his thing. And I was like, I'm not hearing a lot of people with that word of mouth going, oh, I just went in here and it's amazing. It was just like, and that I kind of got that when Clubhouse first launched, and there were some big names in there, but I'm not hearing that now. And I was like, yet another podcast killer that has come and gone.
Right,
and yet
I think those things could be used to just help out podcasts. Like if you host a show and you say, look, we do host a Clubhouse room where we discuss the episode of the week, and you put your episode out on Monday and you tell people you do your live rooms on Clubhouse on Thursday afternoon. That could be beneficial for your show, because now if somebody listens to your episode on Monday and they're like, wait, I have questions, they can take notes or something and come to the Clubhouse room you host for an hour and a half. And then you're going to build more of a brand with your audience. I think it's more of a help to podcasts than it is a killer.
Yeah, for me, it's a great place to figure out what should I be talking about in my podcast. I had a client of mine that was an actor, and he was doing a podcast for acting. And I saw there was a Clubhouse room for actors, and they were talking about auditions and stuff like that. So I plugged my phone into my Rodecaster and just hit record. And then I took that recording and had it transcribed and sent it to him. I said, hey, this is what people are talking about in the acting space. And he's like, oh, this is really, really cool. So for me, that's there's your target audience. Here's what they're talking about. Ooh, I could do an episode on this stuff. So that was a quick way to just hit my phone and left the room and went back and came back in like an hour and was like, all right, that's probably enough. And by having it transcribed, you don't have to listen to the whole thing, because there was a lot of stuff in there that was just, junk, but you could kind of skim it and see, oh, here's something. And so that's, to me, I'm with you. I think it's a way to, because podcasting is time shifted, you can do the opposite. And it's like, hey, like you said, you listen to me on Monday, Thursday night at such and such. And when you show up, you're now seen as trustworthy. Why? Because you said you're going to be there at Thursday at 9, and there you are at Thursday at 9. And it just gives another reason for them to trust you.
Yeah, man, it's so true. Man, I love these conversations with you about podcasts and just getting your opinion on industry trends and stuff, man. It's always insightful to hear from one of the OGs in the game. Let the people know where they can get your book, Profit from Your Podcast.
Yeah, as you might imagine, profitfromyourpodcast.com. You can get it there. You can search for it on Amazon, but you can go to profitfromyourpodcast.com, and there's some episodes there that kind of talk about some of the content in the book, as well as a link right there on the front page.
All right, man. Dave, thank you so much for being here and giving us your opinion, your insight. I feel like this needs to be like a semi-annual thing. Like every few months, I need you back on the show.
Chris, man, I'm always happy. I always tell people you don't have to twist my arm too hard to talk about podcasting. So I appreciate the opportunity, and always great to connect with you.